Welcome to this episode of Lead the Machine podcast, where today's leaders and tomorrow's talk about the human side of AI at work. I'm your host, Kirsten Marr, and so pleased to have today's guest on Lead the Machine, Tim Griffin. Tim brings an incredibly valuable perspective to technology innovation, disruption, and navigating change. From his early days at Accenture as an associate partner, where he helped pioneer low code, no code software, to then founding ALN Medical Management, a healthcare services company that provides back office IT and business process outsourcing for physician practices throughout the US. Now, Tim is focused on real estate investing and has built 16 single family homes and duplexes, in addition to wholesale renovations. Tim owns a 10-bed assisted living residence and a 12-bed sober home in the Denver area. He is also a general partner in two multifamily properties in Denver and Colorado Springs. Even more important, and why we're lucky to spend time listening to Tim today, is the amazing human he is. Tim is very generous with his time and dedication to others. He mentors a bunch of young business leaders to help them grow their business while keeping their sanity, not an easy feat. Tim is active in his church and a number of philanthropic causes. He's currently on the board of a fintech company called Torch Technologies that provides personalized insights to help people plan and escape poverty. Given that more than 85 million workers earn less than $35,000 a year in this country, Torch also provides intelligence through data and modeling to inform government policy, nonprofits, and employers to better serve this community. Tim, thank you so much for joining the critical conversation we need to have on the human side of AI at work. You have highly relevant experience and perspective on how innovative technologies create constant change and the need to adapt and reinvent how we see work and our individual roles. Can you start by sharing a bit more about your story and the early days of AI and software?
Sure. Happy to be here. Yeah, my story, I left, or I started in global consulting, working for what was Arthur Andersen and Company at the time, today Accenture. And I started in their consulting practice on the IT side. And mainly what we were doing early on is building custom systems for, across different kinds of industries, a lot of manufacturing and distribution. We did some packaged software implementations, but a lot of what we were involved with was customization and business process redesign, that type of thing. And I lived in that world for several years. And part of what we were trying to do is figure out how to build software that fit the business rather than the business trying to fit the software. And so that required a lot of custom systems, and we were trying to figure out how to do that more efficiently. Yeah. And so that my world was sort of, business integration, IT integration for large companies for the first 14 years of my career.
And so before AI was a thing and it was named a thing and dominated the headlines, I mean, this was truly revolutionary and transformative when you were working on this. Tell us just a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, when we were building custom software, it was so labor intensive that, we first started obviously automating things on the testing side because that seemed to be, something that was a little easier to create programs, to test programs. And then as we got into that, we're like, well, if we can create these programs that are running these testing scripts, we ought to be able to create programs that generate software code for commonly reused components of custom software. So, if you wanted to, start, there was a user interface that was fairly generalized across the system. Why don't we create a program that can generate that program? And that's a very rudimentary early on, way to do things, but it was the kind of mindset that has evolved obviously significantly today, to the point where, people today are like, should we even buy, packaged software if we can generate it, if we can use AI tools, to generate software that fits our business better. It was sort of a very, very early version of that same thinking.
I have a lot of experience in software, like you do, and I think, there's people who will say AI is going to eat software for lunch
Yeah.
because these custom software programs are so expensive, and every business feels the need to highly customize it.
Yeah.
And the way that legacy software has been built, it is not easy to do. I mean, you can say you have configuration tools, which is better than having everything
Yeah.
custom development. But nonetheless, that is still a major heavy lift to first build and
Right.
then keep updated. And then you have to, install patches and new versions all the time. And it's not really SaaS based.
Well, I think the bigger problem is that, as your business evolves, you get beholden to the data model and the software model, process model that is embedded in the software. So, everybody's brewery looks the same if everybody's using, Oracle.
Yeah.
And you can customize it to some degree, but it's fairly limited because there's so much invested already in the software package itself, and you've spent so much money on the software package that spending a huge amount of money not using it and trying to customize around it, which we did for many years, you can kind of paint yourself into a corner.
You absolutely can. And not only do you have to pay to customize the software from your software vendor, but then you do a bunch of things in your own system to run that software and customize on its end. So you just break things all the time. Every time
Right,
you
and
try to
and
do
their
something new.
enhancement priorities may not be the same as your enhancement priorities. You may have an inventory or warehouse intensive business, and so you need some real significant customizations and enhancement around that part of your business. And they may say, we need, scheduling is what we're going to do next year, and we're going to put your thing off for 2 years. Well, how much value are you losing not having that for a year?
And in my experience, when a software vendor tells you it's 2 years out, it's 5 years out
Yeah,
because
it
the
could be.
roadmaps never get done
You're
on
just
the
so
timeline.
beholden.
Yeah.
You can't make your own priorities. And
And to
that's
be
a challenge.
And to be fair to the software vendors, it's just as hard for them to upgrade
Yeah.
their own system. So they're in the same boat where they want to deliver what you want, but it's actually just as hard for them to do it too. I mean, it's fraught for new innovation. So let's kind of move a little bit here to, I think you really see AI being implemented at an enterprise level and that it's already gained a lot of momentum with things like vehicles or airplanes and other things. I'd love for you to tell us what you're seeing and then maybe circle back to what you think this is going to mean for automation and software supply chains and more.
Yeah, I mean, I think just generally one of the things that you see, especially in software, is you see the development moving, decentralizing into the departments. And because the tools are so much easier to use and to develop software with, I don't need central IT, to build every enhancement. I can actually have my own, 5-person IT team in my department and task them with exactly, what I need, assuming that there's, somebody's managing the data and all that kind of stuff. It just the decentralization of it, I think, is fascinating because that is something, as consultants, we were always pressured by. It's like how do we get the department heads to run their own agenda when it comes to investing their budget and their priorities for business process and performance. And they would be like, well, we can't do anything. We got to have centralized IT to do everything for us.
Mm.
So I think that's a trend that's pretty interesting. But I think AI, just in general, lots the traditional model for software was always a fairly binary logic model. And I think that's, it's if then else, which doesn't cover, the nuances and the fuzzy logic that's really required in business, the kind of multivariate thinking. And I think this is one of the things that you're seeing with, AI engines and large language models and things like that. I mean, it's like these things are starting to be able to think and solve problems that aren't really pre-contemplated, you
And how
know.
do you think that things like autonomous vehicles, and I know you have some experience there. How are they kind of showing the way and what people should take away?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with an autonomous vehicle, you can't pre-plan every decision that vehicle is going to have to make. You build knowledge and logic into it, but think about how much nuance and variability there is in a vehicle driving down a road. I mean, it's just kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. It's like how does the vehicle decide what to do? I mean, I think I explained to you that day. I'm out on a walk with my wife, and I'm walking down the sidewalk and crossing an entrance to a Walgreens, and the autonomous vehicle's approaching, and that vehicle's got to decide what it's going to do. Is it going to let me go? And, after I go, and I've got to decide what I'm going to do. And so it's the human encountering the technology, and it's all, it's actually sitting there thinking, and it waits and it turns its signal on like a human being would. And when my wife and I cross the intersection, it turns.
But it gave you a minute to pause, right?
Yeah, but we're like, well, what's going to happen? Am I going to walk out in the middle of this intersection and this thing's going to make the wrong decision?
And it did.
So, that is kind of, I just think it's fascinating to think about the complexity required to drive a couple 1,000-pound hunk of metal at those speeds.
Yeah.
And it's got to be processing all the variability the whole time. Good enough, like better than a human, because it's got to actually be better than a human.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that these vehicles are going to be given a chance to actually be in production at scale on the roads. It's got to the accidents have to be significantly less than humans.
Right, because we're not going to have a lot of tolerance for.
There's be low tolerance. Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
And I think you also told me something I think that's really interesting about the business model, just from we're empty nesters. We have adult kids who are either college or working. But around how autonomous vehicles are maybe in college towns or otherwhere, building a business model that maybe competes with an Uber, a Lyft, or taxis.
Yeah, completely different thinking around it. I mean, if you look at the actual investment in the capital itself, if you just take a Tesla and kind of their thinking on pooling together, already existing vehicles that are privately owned, well, that's the core of their business versus a $200,000 Jaguar that Waymo has to pay for and maintain, every time that there's a new unit put in production. There's already hundreds of thousands of Y model Teslas. And can you imagine if they come up with a deal where they're like, look, we'll give you the Y model Tesla if you just give it back to us to be used autonomously for a certain number of hours a week, then you don't even have to pay for it. But it's your private vehicle the rest of the time. I mean, that would be unbelievable for young people. I mean, automobiles are a significant expense for everybody, but for somebody who's, who makes, $75,000 a year, a vehicle is a significant cost.
Yeah.
And so I look at the transformative ability. My son would be like, yeah, you want to give me a Tesla, and all I have to do is let you use it for your autonomous pool, 20 hours a week. Let's go. We'll do that tomorrow.
And aren't the autonomous vehicles doing the, rideshare stuff, charging less different?
Completely different model. I don't know what they're going to do, but Tesla's, their pilot in Texas, they just charged a flat fee in a certain range. So as long as you're going only 10 miles or whatever, I think it was $5 or something.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You can't get a
so
Uber, Lyft, or taxi
completely different from what Uber and Lyft are doing. Completely different. They're just because we're trying to take market share.
Yeah.
And we're making money other ways. So.
Which is what Uber did at the beginning, right? They would do some free rides and things like that.
Exactly.
So we'll see where it goes. But the reality is they can probably charge less, even when they, raise their rates over time.
I think that they believe they can.
Yeah. And I know a lot of, CEOs. So here's my perspective on kind of business models and AI today is a lot of, I think, investors and boards pressured companies that said AI is here, as though it hasn't been here for a long time, but obviously generative AI is very new. And I think really pushed a lot of companies to get their quote AI out. And I think a lot of product teams didn't have the time to do what they should do in terms of actual product, research and development. And so things got rushed out. And now you see magazines like Fortune and Forbes saying there's this trough of disillusionment in terms of ROI for it. And I hear it from investors and
Which has been the case on every technology
yes,
innovation ever since the beginning of my career. I mean, every single one of them has this, early adoption, period of disillusionment, figure it out. Now it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now, they go into something different. So it's just this crazy, kind of, it is the cycle of, you know, product introduction. It's what happens. It's the product life cycle over and over again. And it's not just in technology, it's in, everything.
so I think that's good for people to always understand that this is not the first time that they're like, here's the hype, where's your stuff? It's not producing value.
Yeah.
And this is where people have to be discerning. And, I'll use the example when the internet first came out, same hype, lots of people failed at the first models, but the internet wasn't going away. The internet is ubiquitous, like across
Yeah,
all levels. And I see AI more like that. Like
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
don't see there's an industry that's not going to be touched and transformed.
You have to. I mean, you're going to be left in the dust if you don't figure out how to apply it. So there are going to be some, as there should be, a lot of attempts and failures.
Yeah.
That's how evolution of these things happens. But it's the second guy through the door that often, gets more value. So somebody's going to have to, fail and wander around in the dark a little bit, and then somebody else will come along and say, okay,
Yeah.
I get it, and now I know how to use it.
Yeah. The arrows in the back for the early one. Like, yeah.
Exactly. Always.
You got to
Yeah.
be, but being a fast follower is not always a bad thing. So then maybe let's talk about, healthcare because you have so much experience in healthcare and there's so much attention being placed in terms of how AI can transform this particular industry. You've
Yeah.
talked about it. You founded a company to bring more efficiency and automation to the back office and the billing process.
Right.
What do you see happening now and where do you see things going in healthcare?
Well, I think on the back office side, and we called for this long ago. We were attempting to use technology to transform the back office for years, but now it's been. I think there's kind of a leap in function going in that industry now. Part of it's because of consolidation and standardization, but part of it is because now I think the regulatory part of that industry has sort of allowed people to generate healthcare claims that are actually, already kind of pre-screened or pre-edited to not deny. Because in that business, healthcare claims, the thing that gathers cost in that business is the inefficient claim that gets submitted and adjudicated and denied. The whole business is about like how do we deal with this problem of denials of errors essentially in a claim. So if you can figure out how to reverse engineer that process and use AI to read your claim on the front end, which used to be super expensive, but now with AI tools, you could read that claim and have all the adjudication knowledge in the large language model, and you're going to know instantly whether that claim is going to deny before you ever submit it to insurance. I mean, imagine the transformation of that if you get an acceptance rate in the high 90s versus the 60s, which is where
That's
it historically has been. There's going to be so much cost savings, so much more efficiency that's going to happen in that back office or in that claims, revenue cycle management model. It's going to change
and
everything.
I mean, what do you see? I mean, because this is one of the major problems with the brand perception and customer experience of insurance is getting your claim denied.
Yeah.
So, do you think it's going to help then also, the customer experience of feeling like,
Satisfaction. Yeah. Customer satisfaction will go up significantly. That's the shadow opportunity here is just how much disillusionment and dissatisfaction there is in the actual insured life around a claim.
I
You know,
pay my premiums for the promise of paying my claim, and then
everybody talks about the providers and everyone talks about the insurance companies and all the efficiencies and value created there. But the real value, like you said, is if I don't have to get on the phone with the insurance company and fight through trying to figure out what's going on with my claim and what do I really owe, because that's just so dissatisfying to consumers, you
It's
know.
so dissatisfying because it's like insurance doesn't live up to its promise in those moments if I'm the consumer. That's how I feel.
And it's a complex thing that many consumers don't even understand. I mean, that the whole insurance model is complex, and half the people walking around, unless you encounter it a lot and you're used to it or you worked in it or something, it's pretty complex to understand. Why do I owe this? And I thought I already paid this, or it's like, why am I getting all these notifications in the mail? It's super confusing. And if you could clean that up, it would save people a lot of grief.
It really would. My background and the company that I was CMO at and then president of Valid Analytics, we went on the pricing side for commercial insurance to get the premiums right. So, the other side is, am I paying too much? And
Right.
I think what people don't always understand about insurance is it's really hard for insurance companies to know how to price your risk.
Yeah.
There's this information asymmetry in both charging premiums and paying claims, where the insured knows everything about themselves, both
Yeah.
in terms of when they put an application in, whether they're an individual or a business, and then what's going on in their claim. Your insurance agent knows less than the insured, and the insurance company often knows the least in that chain.
Right.
And so you can be overcharged because they kind of have to average stuff out. And so
Right.
higher risk people are subsidized by lower risk people. And
Exactly.
when we use advanced analytics and data and AI, it actually gets fairer
Yeah.
on the premiums that are charged and the way the claims are processed if it's done in the right way.
Yeah. And like you and I said, when you put buy an insurance policy, you're, probably, underpaying for things you really need and overpaying for things you don't need. So if you can customize your insurance policy to really fit you better, I mean, much more satisfaction. And I think the risk gets managed by the insurance company better as well. So everybody should be happier. But that takes something like AI to be able to customize, like mass customize that very quickly, turn it around, and actually make it work from a risk standpoint.
It'll be really interesting to see how it plays out because it requires trust from the consumer, the insured, to realize that the more the insurance company knows, the better it actually can be for you. It doesn't feel like that today, but I
Right.
think that's kind of the promise of AI is
That,
that it can actually make it fairer for the policyholder and give you better satisfaction when you actually need to use your insurance.
yeah,
So,
the challenge that you have obviously in that is the third dimension is policy and political
yes,
side. That
and
that
regulations.
and regulations in it. They decide that even though it's more fair for you to pay for somebody else's fire risk, you know, it, we're going to make you pay for it anyway because
Yeah.
that's and there's a whole policy side of that that's really intriguing as well.
It really is intriguing. But anyway, so it's a very interesting problem. And if you're an individual contributor or future leader, what a place to really dig in and see, what is going to be needed in terms of new roles. What do you see happening on the provider side in terms of AI with
I
healthcare?
think that's even leaps and bounds more powerful. If you think about the fact, just the simple fact that you're not dealing with, you know, business value and dollars and cents and that type of thing, but you're dealing with actual lives, quality of life, length of life, that type of thing. If you can get protocols, if you can use AI, to get the optimal protocols, because as good as our providers are, they're human, and they're only as good as their education and their experience, which is fallible. And not that AI is perfect, but if you take the collective experience of millions and millions of encounters and outcomes, and you build that into an AI engine, and you can feed the provider the right answer, that they you don't we don't want to take the provider out of the equation, But man, if you could enable them with equip them with a lot better knowledge, how much more powerful would that be in terms of, how they administer care? Think about how powerful this was. There wasn't drug interaction checking. That happened 15 years ago or so, where, somebody would, put a script together and they would run it through a drug interaction checker to determine whether there was, problems with other drugs that you were on. I mean, that didn't actually, there was a day 15 years ago that didn't exist, and people would die because of it. It's a simple example, but if you take that example and you apply it to, the broader scope of care, imagine how much more valuable that can be, for providers. There's no limit. I mean, it's amazing on how much better robots can perform very difficult precision surgeries much better than a human could.
Yeah. So one of the things we love to talk about here at Lead the Machine is adoption issues and resistance. So how do you see physicians reacting to this and their resistance, and what have you seen?
I went through the era of the first level of technology adoption by physicians with electronic medical records, and it was brutal. Yeah. It was absolutely brutal. Having lived in the consulting world, I think business people were much more used to using, technology to enable their business processes, and that's kind of sort of been around for, 40 years or something. The physicians, prior to electronic medical records, a lot of physicians never interfaced with technology ever, not on their personal life, not in their business life, like nothing ever. So this was the first time they ever had to interface with technology, and a lot of them left medicine because of it. It just so overwhelming, and so
like an affront to who they were and their
couldn't deal with it. They just couldn't deal with it. They're just like, this is a good chance for me I'm done.
Interesting.
And so, it takes, I think, generations. Now, this current generation of physicians is much more comfortable. You're a decade in or whatever it is. Everybody's adopted electronic medical records, and it's just the way you do things. And most people can't even remember the way it was before this.
Yeah.
But now it's asking that same, the next lift, the next level is, we're going to bring this into your clinical world and your clinical decision making. And it's not going to be an option. If you want to get, if you want to use insurance and get reimbursed by insurance, the insurance companies are going to require it, because it improves the cost model, but it also improves the quality of care and the satisfaction of the patient, which is what they're all about. So it's not going to be an option. It's going to go like EMR. EMR was an option for a little while.
EMR meaning electronic medical records.
Yeah, electronic medical records they were optional for a few years, and then everyone's like, no, we can't. This needs to actually be a standard.
So it's so interesting, because today, pervasively, people will say insurance companies are way too involved and with me and my doctor, and you should leave decisions up to me and my doctor. I mean, how do you see this kind of playing out? Because
I can understand that argument, but given the cost of healthcare, the predominant thing that consumers say over and over again is, I'm paying way too much for healthcare, and not feeling like I'm not getting enough for what I'm paying for. I mean, dramatic argument around that. And the only way to significantly address that argument is technology. Mm-hmm. It's, you want to reduce the cost, improve the outcomes, and, it's that there is no other transformative way to address that problem. This is the way.
Do you see if physicians can start embracing it and maybe help training the AI so that the AI is being informed by the physician? Do you see a world where insurance companies stop interfering so much if they feel like, the physicians are sort of adopted? Because that's where a lot of the friction comes, is my doctor said this and the insurance company says no. Do you see that being resolved over time? I don't see
the insurance companies interfering less. I don't.
They're going to interfere more.
Well, I think what they're saying is exactly what you said, is we've got all the data in these electronic medical records where we've got, here's the condition, here was the treatment, here's the outcome. We've got that over and over again, millions and millions and millions of times for millions of conditions. We've got the data. We know what works. Mm-hmm. And it's your data. It's decisions you and your peers made.
Mhm.
And certain peers do a lot better than others. That's just been proven over and over again. Certain, procedures, certain treatments, certain decisions result in better outcomes. And so we're going to pick the better outcomes, and then we're going to tell everybody this is what you should do. That just seems logical.
Mhm.
So you're not going to, it's like, you can't fight City Hall. It's just too logical. It's just, it's just too much cost savings. And it's sad because for some providers, they don't see that as their job. They see their job as I come up with a custom, decision on every patient. And
Mhm.
that's why I went to medical school, and that's why I'm the smartest guy in the class and all that. And it does come into play, but it'll come into play on the margins much more so. The heart of the matter, the 80%, it'll turn it. 80% of the decisions will be made out of the collective wisdom of all the outcomes that are out there, as they should. I mean, if my kid is in trouble and has some kind of an issue, I want you to use the outcomes data to make the decision. Or for me, I want that.
It's interesting. How do you see this for, because there's lots of people who legitimately need certain care that, insurance denies. Do you see any bright light for them that if we're using more of this outcomes data, that people actually get what they need, even if it's a little different from what the
I
doctor
think if
thought?
you could reduce the overall cost significantly,
Hmm.
then it opens up opportunity to cover more treatment.
Yeah,
It should.
it
It
should.
should. But this has been the age-old conundrum between U.S. healthcare and how healthcare is deployed in the rest of the world. Should 80% of the people be paying for 20% of the care? Because that's essentially what happens in the U.S. healthcare
Mhm.
system. It's, the end of life is what consumes most of the dollars in healthcare. And in other countries, they say, we're not doing it that way. End of life, you just need to end your life.
Yeah.
And,
Instead of
the US,
prolong it and
yeah, and spend, gobs of money, preserving your life for another 6 months. Like we're not going to do that.
it's
It's a
super,
it's a
yeah,
it's a it's a ethical like argument. It's hard argument. I'm
it
not
is.
saying I understand the answer or I know the answer. I'm just saying it's just decisions and consequences.
It is. It's really interesting to see if people on all sides of this can find a new way forward. To your point, if you can lower the cost, then there's more options
Yeah.
because there's so much cost in things that are very inefficient. If we can really get that under control, can we get all these stakeholders feeling like they're better served on all fronts? It's an
I mean,
interesting
I
thing.
think it's possible. I think technology could significantly reduce the cost for about 80% of the care. And it can open up a lot of opportunity to improve care.
And if you're someone looking to make your mark and make an impact, what a place to make an impact.
Sure.
Right? To help drive the technology, to help define the AI, to help train it, to help people understand what's now possible. Hey, if we reduce the cost, don't take that all as profit. Like, take what you need as profit, but let's employ it in these other ways. I mean, I don't know, I think there's a lot of opportunity for people that want to have a purpose-driven career, which I think a lot of our millennials and Gen Z, they want purpose in their life. Seems
Absolutely.
to me like helping transform healthcare is one area to think about. Well, let's kind of talk more, maybe take a step back out of healthcare and just, talk about, today's individual contributors and those that are aspiring to be future leaders in terms of how they really can think about redefining their own careers, given all this change. Like if you were starting your career out today,
Yeah.
but with all the experience that you've had in terms of thinking about, well, all right, what does this mean, for my
Yeah,
job?
I mean,
How do I redefine it?
I think
Career?
at some level, I think it really gets back to the age-old, change adoption equation.
Mhm.
It's like there's always been people that are more willing to embrace change, and always, people that want to sit back and sort of wait and see. And then there's always the people that are, pulled along at the end, kicking and screaming. And I don't think this is really any different, but I think the thing that is like if I'm a young person and I want to have an interesting career and be able to contribute a lot of value and get rewarded for it and work for cool companies, the more of adopting change at a greater rate and not being afraid of it is going to result in you getting those kinds of opportunities. It's always been that way, but it's just kind of accelerated it because the change or the technology innovation curve is accelerating so fast. And so if you're a person who adopts it faster, you're just by definition going to get better opportunities. And I think that's what lots of people are starting to see. It's like I have to actually spend part of my learning time, part of my personal, professional development has to be staying on top of these technologies because the technologies aren't for the IT guys anymore. Yeah. Technologies are for everybody. Yeah. And I think that's a big difference. I think it used to be, IT guys have always had to do that. There's always new coding language. There's always, some kind of a new back-end technology. The IT guys we've lived in this world for our whole career. There's always something around the corner and you just have to be on top of it all the time. The difference is now everybody has to do that. Yeah. Because it's not like Excel or Microsoft Word or something that's just here and barely changes. It's now like tomorrow there's ChatGPT and that changed everything. Yeah. And if you don't know how to use it, you're left in the dust.
You are. And we've kind of talked around this, but we can get a little more specific. We've talked about software and systems, but there's this whole role now of how you integrate all this stuff and how these legacy systems work with the new technology. And I love one of the stories that you've shared with me about, your daughter Claire and how she's kind of serving as this, I think you called it a human glue maker, in terms of integration. And maybe this is a whole new kind of career opportunity people can think about. Maybe you can share that story.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because if you think she's in the event management business, and so in a small company, so it's a handful of people that have this small event management company. So you don't think about that as being like bastion of innovative technology, but it's crazy how many different technologies she's running. Operations and customer delivery, and so she's trying to innovate on so many different fronts. In terms of, how do we communicate with customers? How do we communicate with vendors? How do we invoice? All the, sort of blocking and tackling that you would do for a small business, but she doesn't have the luxury of going and hiring a bunch of people to do this. Mm-hmm. And so her brain, because she's 28, is just like, how can I go find affordable technologies that can do X, Y, and Z? And she's not a technology person by nature. She just is the business person trying to solve an operations problem without hiring another person. And so she's out there, selecting technologies, and now she's got to figure out how to get them to talk to each other. Otherwise, the people have to, manage 10 different technologies and the integration of all that. And, so sometimes the vendors, pre-integrate these products with other vendors, but a lot of times that's not the case. Yeah. And
they say they do, but then you get into it and it's just not.
Well, and she can't hire an IT guy to go do this. Mm-hmm. And so she's trying to figure out as a non-IT person, how do I integrate a bunch of web-based technologies? It's fascinating for me to watch this because I can see this going down, a million times over all across businesses. She's doing the same things that huge companies are doing. That's what I think is different, is this is reaching into every corner of business.
And so that's like a brand new kind of role that AI is opening up for people because
it's an age-old role.
But it's a business person can do it now.
Right. Yeah. It's an age-old role of being a business integrator and technology integrator. That's been around forever, but it used to only use those terms for large companies. Yeah. Now your mom and pop shop better have somebody with an integration mindset.
So if you're, a product owner, a product manager, even, in engineering or R&D, what do you see as their possibilities in terms of new things that they could be doing in their jobs?
Oh, I think it's radical. Some of the things I'm hearing about, the innovation in that space is mind blowing to me. I mean, I I think it's BYD is the company, the electronic vehicle company in China.
Mhm.
And what I heard, and I don't know if I haven't verified this, but I assume it to be true, is you can now order an electronic vehicle or electric vehicle from this BYD company on an internet portal and customize it, significantly customize it. This vehicle has not been built yet. You're just customizing it. It will get built 90% by robots in about a couple of weeks, and it will be delivered to your driveway inside of 30 days.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that is transformative, truly. I mean, because everybody talks about the part of the automobile market that there's a whole bunch of people in this world that just want, like, just give me an inexpensive automobile that I can use for transportation.
Especially people in big cities. I mean, I just need to get from point A to point B.
And they're doing, BYD is delivering that. I think they said at 50% of the cost of a Tesla.
Wow.
So, and I believe
And it's custom to me. I got to choose it.
delivered in 30 days. I don't have to go to the, dealership. I don't have to deal with any of that. It's just all like simple, friction-free transaction, and that vehicle shows up in my driveway. That is innovation.
I think about what you can do with digital products, with software.
That's why I think that people are predicting the death of ERPs.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people are coming out and saying ERPs are dead man walking. These things will be replaced with customized AI built solutions in a decade, which is, think about the implication of that. That's a massive industry. The consulting companies, like, it's transformative. It's crazy what that would do to business.
Well, we know from our experiences that there are always winners and losers, right? With major breakthroughs in tech innovation. And even for people excited about the possibilities of AI and generative AI, there's definitely, trepidation. What's going to happen to my individual job? Is it going to go away? What value as a human do I even offer if AI can do a lot of the things that I do today? How do you advise, employees and people to think about, this reality?
Yeah. Somebody told me early on in my career, which I think still holds true, is stay close to the customer, stay close to relationships. And I think that is so critically true because, the nuances of like the human relationship in the business transaction, whether you're in sales or whether you're in service or, whether you're in product development, whatever, those are going to be the last things to go always. Is who maintains the relationships with the vendors, who maintains the relationships with the customers, with the employees. Those things will be hard for AI to replace. And so I've always told people, leadership, you know, those types of things. I mean, and some people are like, I don't like people. I don't like relationships. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but realize that part of the world is just more prone to be, replaced or transformed with AI. But somebody's got to, back to our previous conversation, somebody's got to manage these technologies.
Yeah.
And so if you're good at managing the technologies, even though you might not be, a salesperson, if you're good at managing the technologies, there's still going to be a lot of roles doing that.
I mean, there's massive need for governing AI and
Yes.
watching these models and, having a background running data analytics and, data science companies. Models can drift, but AI models can drift a lot, right? And you hear
Yeah.
about hallucinations, and when we say model drift, what we mean is the model was built for something, but as the machine learns, it can drift in ways that you didn't intend.
Yeah.
It's impossible to know. So there's a lot of need for human oversight. We've talked about the momentum and all the possibilities and sort of the inevitable nature of AI impacting so many industries. At the same time, there's no doubt that there are downsides and things to be cautious about. So, what do you think that companies, regulators, and individuals should be thinking about and what should they be doing to put the right guardrails in place?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer, but I see the risk growing significantly. The security risk. I mean, obviously, when you get more and more and more dependent upon technology, which is inevitable, this is going to happen, then you're more and more at risk of a security breach or something shutting down your technology. And so I think the innovation on that side of technology is probably one of the most important things going on, is how do you stay ahead of the risk side of this equation? Because it doesn't, I mean, I watched it happen at a very small scale with one of my physician practices. They couldn't, what they worked really hard to get to electronic medical records, so they didn't have any paper charts anymore. And then they got hacked and they couldn't get to their medical charts. And it was a, obstetrics practice delivering babies. And it's pretty scary to have to deliver babies without the mom's medical chart, but they literally couldn't get to the charts.
Wow. And
But the baby's not waiting.
No,
Baby's,
baby is not going to.
yeah. So I mean, you just look at that's a small example,
But it's an important one.
But yeah, but I mean, risk is technology security risk is a massive thing.
It is, and protecting privacy, and listen, I love using Chat GPT and the other LLMs, but you also just think about your own personal IP that you're putting into
All your data is going in.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yep.
And not everybody can afford private large language models. Not every business, like even your daughter's business, is not big enough.
No.
If you're seeing so much of your job being replaced, with AI being able to do it, there's lots of places for you to play to make sure that AI is doing what we actually mean, and as it learns, that it doesn't drift to areas that you don't want. It's not all upside, there's downside, but there's opportunity in managing and mitigating. I mean, it's a fascinating time to be alive, to see this level of transformative innovation and risk and opportunity. That's why, I'm so committed to talking about kind of the human side of this stuff, and where do we play and where are those gaps. And if we don't get involved and manage the downside too, then we're just letting it happen to us. You just have to kind of rethink, where the value.
Well, and I think step one is just considering the inevitability of it. You're not putting it back in the box. It's here, and it's gonna the evolution of it is going to increase. The pace is going to increase so significantly.
And it is a get on board moment and figure out where you want to play and how you want to kind of protect the future, right?
Yep.
And not your own future, but also just collectively. Like, it's a time to be kind of a collective community thinker about what all that stuff means. So your time today has been so incredibly valuable. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd love to impart on the audience or kind of share as we wrap up?
I just say keep going. I think you're on to the right track. It's how do humans adopt and embrace and stay in the driver's seat of this innovation. I think that's the key. And I think this kind of helping people to think about it in positive ways so they're not afraid of it, I think is so huge. So thanks for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you, Tim, for sharing all of your insights, and for all those of you watching, what you all are thinking about and reacting to as you're hearing these conversations. So thank you again, Tim.
Sounds great. Take care.